is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the resistance. We are the info war. The system of the Norman and William the Conqueror, and that system that became the modern empire and the imperium and puppet governments and councils on foreign relations and Royal Institute of International Affairs, these corporate governances that control government that the British Empire created, definitely the ghost of the British Empire possesses and runs the Anglo-American North Atlantic treaty conglomerate that ties into the EU. That is the dominant force in the world. And then you've got the Chinese that are somewhat double dealing with it. The Russians are isolated, being attacked. You got to root for the underdog because they're not doing anything to anybody. And I'm not romanticizing it either. It's just they're not doing anything to us. Criminal elements that are trying to impoverish us as political control under eugenics-based systems, Agenda 21, what I call neo-feudalistic serfdom, are trying to do the same thing to us they've done to the Russians before. And so I'm for team humanity and really building a future, a renaissance. And I know Lyndon LaRouche is for that as well. That's why he's been so roundly demonized for decades. And what I want you to give us here is solutions. But first I want to bring this up because this is a clip from 6-7 years ago on C-SPAN. I happened to be watching C-SPAN in the coffee room back there and caught this on tape. And it's coming up in the upcoming Obama film. We're actually getting into this British issue because most of our leadership, Democrat and Republican, become knighted later and even get properties and money and all these other things. And it's a big deal. And this is what elites relish more than anything, is not just becoming a knight, but a knight commander of the Order of Bath, which is a, you know, he can walk right into MI6 and give orders if he wants to. They act like the Queen doesn't run anything, folks. She runs that whole country. She tells the Prime Minister what to do. She shuts down roads in England every day randomly to exercise her power. They're above the law when they're not hanging around with Jimmy Savile. So I want to play this clip and get him to encapsulate what the British monarchy is, because it's bigger than the monarchy. Because then they double back. There's this war against sovereignty. People go, well, I'm for the monarchy, and then it gives us sovereignty. You know, that's British. Well, they're not even British. But I want to play this clip and get Lyndon LaRouche's take on it. Here is Colin Powell walking into a reception to go into a dinner with the Queen of England in D.C. Here it is.
Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath.
Pardon me?
Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath. Very honored. Her Majesty gave it to Alman to me about 12 years ago. Knight Commander.
Okay.
Listen carefully. Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath.
And what's the other one?
Same thing.
Same thing.
There was only one thing bigger than Hollywood in the 20s and 30s, and that was the British Hollywood. And if you watch all those old movies, it's all British propaganda. And we were taught to hate the French, love the British. I mean, so you can see the programming. Pratt Street, Council on Foreign Relations, 1922, set up to take over our government, British intelligence. This is a fact. Now, I don't see what's left of the British people. We're not talking about them. That's been sucked dry by this. We're talking about the Norman class, if you want to go back to where this came from, still ruling much of the world today, tied into the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and others. Is that an improper analysis from you, the grand expert on this, Lyndon LaRouche?
It's actually older. It goes back to
Venetian
history of Zeus and Prometheus, which was famous in the Greek history, and it actually is the model in terms of everything in transatlantic culture, for example, in terms of history.
Break it down for us, please.
What? Yeah. So this, I mean, what we're involved in is we're involved with two systems. One system is against the Roman Empire in particular, and the British Empire, which is formed about the same time that the British declared war on their former colonies, are the same thing. This is an old-standing thing. This is what is called an imperial empire. It's not a national thing. Their national interests and so forth are part of the game that play the whole game. But the issue is, it's the same thing is what Columbus affected through the influence of Nicholas of Cusa on him. That we sent people across the oceans to colonize in the area across the Atlantic Ocean. in the hope, because Nicholas of Cusa, who was this great priest who created this policy, to cross the oceans because Europe was a mess. And what happened is this happened. Columbus's discovery was part of this process. And what became the United States was an expression of recognizing the terrible conditions of Europe. Now, for a great period of time, we find that since the United States was established and was being established, we had much support for the United States and its cause from Europe. But what has happened is the Roman Empire, now, which is now brought up as the British Empire, because that occurred at the same time that we got into our war with what became the United States. Because the British Empire had taken over and was determined to become a world empire. So other nations supported us in our revolution to create our United States on that basis. But since that time, the British Empire has again and again tried to control us. They've controlled us from inside, for example, New York City is a center of this pollution of the British taking over Manhattan through the international British-controlled banking. Wall Street is a product of that. Wall Street is actually a British agency. It is not an American agency. And my determination is to get back to a Glass-Steagall system and bankrupt these characters, and we could do it if the will were there. We are now going bankrupt. We have the state of Texas is dying. The state of California is dying. It will go on for years to come unless we do something about it. And I say we have to do something about it. And the question is, can we in the United States, by getting Obama thrown out of power, and 70% of the American people want Obama eliminated from power. I'm one of the first. Get this guy out of there. If we do that, we can take measures to save our country. And if the United States is not included, does not choose to put itself involved in a war with the British interests against the Eurasian interests, if we don't go into such a war, there will be no such war. And what I'm concerned about, pull Obama out of office right now. You've got about probably 70% of the voters want him out of there. Let's get him out of there.
Sure. Quantify why it's important to get him out, what signal it sends, how you believe it will derail this whole out-of-control downhill avalanche that's happening.
Exactly. We can do it. And that's what I'm working on. And I find that there are an increasing number of people who have know me for a long period of time. And, they used to duck me because they say, you're right, but don't tell anybody I told you so. And these are from leading people circles. And I do work with leading circles internationally and in the United States. I do that. And I have a special role to play because of my forecasting capability.
And by the way, I'm not getting you to talk about yourself, but it's really unknown out there other than a few Washington Post, Washington Time articles and things from the 80s when Ronald Reagan was reading your stuff and when you were visiting the CIA every week, landing in your own helicopter. Everybody was real jealous, the Washington Post said. And then, of course, it said your connections back to the OSS, what you did in World War II, that's all shadowy. Talk about yourself a little bit, because you are a very interesting person, Lennon. Tell us how you got into these international circles and why multiple CIA directors, we can pull them up if folks want to, I forget the main one, said you, quote, had the best private intelligence network in the world. I mean, that's pretty interesting. And then meanwhile, most people just hear, Lyndon LaRouche, I heard he's crazy because CNBC said so or MSNBC said so.
I wouldn't pay any attention to foolish people like that.
No, I know. But I mean, I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but, you're 90 years old now. You've had this great life. I mean, tell us, how did you get into these power circles? And I mean, really, who are you?
No, I just happened to be, I didn't like the education system I was exposed to in schools. I thought it was stupid, and I was right. And therefore, I became successful and unpopular at the same time because I would never submit. I don't believe that we have teachers who are supposed to tell us what to think. We're supposed to have teachers to guide us into making discoveries of our own and testing those discoveries and that sort of process. So, I mean, for a long time, I hated Euclidean geometry. I despised it. I was right, absolutely correct. It's stupid. You still have people who believe in that nonsense. But so therefore I had developed these scientific capabilities, and I became a consultant in the 1950s. I was a very important consultant at one point. And then I got in a fight with the FBI, and the FBI was not pleased that I would not obey them. And so I had some periods of troubles then, but I was still doing what I was doing. And then I had a forecast in 1958 that I made and said, or 68 rather. And I said, well, through about 2 or 3 years, this whole thing is blowing up. Your whole Wall Street system is going to blow up. And came along the 1971 and the summer of 71, and the whole thing blew up. So there was a big discussion then about that, and I was invited to debate all these characters from Wall Street and in their offices in a meeting we had at December 2nd of that year. And I was right, and I've always been right on this. And what's happened is I've always really been against the British and Wall Street crowd. Their conception of economy has destroyed the United States, and I've been against it. And they bounce me down, but I still myself, and I do the same thing I do. I don't change because they bounced me down a couple of times. They got tired of me. They were threatened when I was, Reagan and so forth. Ronald Reagan cleared the way that I should lead the SDI program. And that involved international forces, leading forces in Italy, France.
That's right, because it's on record that you're one of the original people to call for it, but as a way to have international force to actually stop asteroids. And Reagan liked that idea because that would help sell it, I guess.
No, Reagan was actually two things. He was the president, and a lot of our presidents have an opportunist side to them, as I think you know. Some of them are good otherwise, and Reagan was one of those cases. He was not the greatest genius among our presidents, but he was a very serious figure. He was close to the Franklin Roosevelt circles in his time. He was an officer, a flying officer, so to speak, in that period, during that wartime period. And my basis, in terms of social basis, was largely from my experience with World War II. I was no significance in that period as such. But I was associated with the OSS, for example, or at a later time. I didn't know them as OSS then, but they came to me in a later point of life and came all veterans of the OSS, surviving veterans, and they became a key part of the Reagan administration. And therefore, I was the one who mustered this international campaign for a strategic defense initiative. And I'm still in the same kind of commitment with a little change in technology. I'm now worried about how we're going to deal with the moon. I want to get some thermonuclear power here in this planet of ours at a new level, which discoveries on the moon show that we can do. And I want to get a program of economic development, which I think will be sufficient, given even a relative handful of scientists. But you've got to do a handful of very good scientists working together on thermonuclear fusion, enhanced by helium-3. You do that, you can take a handful of scientists in various nations, and you can build the greatest power of progress for mankind that ever was imagined. And that's what I'm committed to.
Progress, absolutely, real progress, not the eugenicist deindustrialization progress. Well, people need to call Congress, and it's starting to happen, and say impeach Obama, throw him out of office, arrest him, go after Holder, because they're starting to persecute the press, sir, as you know. They've arrested Dinesh D'Souza. They're arresting governors for no reason. They're threatening people. I'm being threatened. I don't want to give it any attention, but folks need to pray for us. You know what it's like when they start threatening you. But that shows we're getting to them, right?
I would say, look, we got 70% of the population of the United States wants this bum out now.
I think it's 77, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's. But then you have people, members of Congress, not a majority, but I think you could probably get, in a fair term, about 20% of the members of the Congress, I think, would be willing right now to say, throw the bum out. As a matter of fact, some members of the Congress are almost hysterical. Get this nut out of there.
It is crazy. I've never seen power grabbing like it. What do you know from your sources about Obama the man? Is he a total puppet? What's going on with him?
He would have been nothing except for a woman called Valerie Jarrett. Now, Valerie Jarrett was an American by law, but she was really a British agent. And she was assigned to go back into the United States, and through some corrupt people at Harvard and things like that, this monkey, or virtual monkey, became a political figure. He was nothing. He would never have become anything except for Valerie Jarrett. He is not really a president in a functional sense. I mean, he runs around with his jockstrap between the two parts of the White House, the family part, the other part's the public part. And he was playing with basketballs up in this little room which separates these two parts of the White House. And so he was not really much of a heavyweight. His mental capabilities and ideas are virtually zilch, or less than zero in some respects. I think is probably better. So he's only an instrument. And what happened is the British system got him elected president by the biggest drug deal ever run. And you remember that when he was running against Hillary Clinton and came down to Texas, and they were running pretty much neck by neck. And the drug flow from Texas, the drug money through Texas, coming out of London, was the thing that won him his presidency. And Wall Street was fully behind it.
I know you've written books and everything about the British Empire running most of the drugs, and boy, is that certainly true. Their big banks openly launder the majority of the money. They get caught, they don't get in trouble. All right, well, Lyndon LaRouche, thank you so much for all of the time. We'll put your websites up on screen, and you and any of your other crew you'd like to recommend. I'd like to get some of the doctors you've got on staff, I know, to come on, and some of your researchers talk about Obamacare and what it would do. You were right about that, saying it was death care. And I really appreciate you spending time with us. Hopefully we can stop World War III.
Right, exactly.
Thank you very much. The globalists have controlled the mainstream media for a long time, but now they're expanding, making the weaponization even more vicious and deceptive. All the major networks are state-run.
We are partnering this year with the NFL.
The NFL has become a political weapon against the Second Amendment and pushes Obamacare. MSNBC tells us that our children belong to the state.
We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
The brainwashing media machine has been turned up on high, and it's time for humanity to double down on the true people's media and strike back against the tyrants that are destroying our civilization with their lies and fraud. We are the resistance. You are the resistance. You are the info war. It is more important than ever to realize that we are not the alternative media. We are the true media. The establishment dinosaur press is dying.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
Join us at InfoWarsNews.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Members can share their memberships with up to 11 people. By subscribing, you will literally be buying war bonds in the info war to expand our operation in the face of the tyrants. Join us at PrisonPlanet.tv.